Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today at the University of Toronto Schwartz Reisman Innovation Campus. My name is Sheila McElwraith. I'm a professor in the Department of Computer Science at Canada CIFAR AI Chair at the Webster Institute up on 11, 12, and 13, and also an associate director at the Schwartz Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. It's my great pleasure to moderate today's special in-person SRI seminar, co-hosted with the Department of Computer Science as part of our CC Gotlieb Distinguished Lecture Series, and supported in part by a generous gift from the Webster Family Charitable Giving Foundation, so thank you to them. The CC Kelly Gotlieb Distinguished Lecture Series is named in honor of Professor Emeritus Calvin C. Gotlieb, a founding member of the Department of Computer Science. Through his vision, inspiration, and leadership, Gotlieb brought Canadians into the modern age of computing. His efforts led to the establishment of the Computation Center at the University of Toronto in 1948, which would then become the Department of Computer Science. In 1951, he introduced the first undergrad and grad courses in computing in Canada. Gotlieb's progressive ideas and revolutionary vision remain the foundation of today's computer technology. To quote the Order of Canada, that he was recognized for, he has been largely responsible for leading Canadians into the modern age of computing and has contributed immeasurably to understanding and the development of information technology in the academic community. And just as a personal observation, for many years, Kelly Gotlieb used to attend the Department of Computer Science Distinguished Lecture Series well into his 90s. He would come into the room and sit in the audience, and he would often ask questions, actually. So it was really meaningful that this lecture series in the Department of Computer Science was named after him, and he is sorely missed. Not second, but no less important, the Schwartz Reisman Institute is especially delighted to be partnering with the Department of Computer Science in this event. SRI is a research and solution hub dedicated to ensuring that powerful technologies like artificial intelligence are safe, fair, and ethical, and make the world better for everyone. With researchers in fields ranging from law, philosophy, and political science to computer science, engineering, and beyond, SRI develops new frameworks to understand the social implications of technology in the present age and reinvent laws, institutions, and social values to ensure that technology is designed, governed, and deployed to deliver a more just and inclusive world. Partnerships like this one with the Department of Computer Science allow us to engage not only in the technical frontiers of AI, but also to look at the broader social and human questions that really are central to these technologies that we're experiencing today. So we're grateful to our departments, to our colleagues within the Department of Computer Science, and we gratefully acknowledge the support of the Webster Family Charitable Giving Foundation for this event. And now to the reason we're all here. I'm very delighted to introduce, oh, actually, sorry, before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to give a land acknowledgement. So before we begin today's session, I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the land the University of Toronto operates on. For thousands of years, Toronto has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. While some of us may be joining from different places today, that's for those of you who are online, we invite you to reflect on the history and relations of the land that you are on. Just a few logistics, and actually the first one is very important. So we're recording this event. The other thing you'll notice is that neither David nor I are wearing a microphone, and that's because this entire room is wired for microphone sound, which means that any little side conversations or comments, disparaging comments about David's talk will be caught on. So please try to go outside or limit your comments. The other thing I wanted to say, David will be speaking for approximately 50 minutes, and there is a Q&A afterwards, but David was saying beforehand that he really, because of the interdisciplinary nature of our audience, he really welcomes, for those who are here in person, if there's something you don't understand or something that you need clarification, please raise your hand and David will recognize it as, invite you to speak as appropriate, but in turn, I would ask that you please try to be brief with whatever you want to ask a question or a clarifying question about, so that we can get on and he can finish his talk in a timely manner. And now it is my tremendous pleasure to introduce my colleague, David Duvenaud. who is an associate professor in the departments of computer science and statistical science at the University of Toronto. He holds the Schwartz Reisman Chair in Technology and Society at SRI. He has a long bio. He's a Canada CIFAR AI Chair and also a founding member of the Webster Institute for Artificial Intelligence. He's a member of ICED's Canada's Safe and Secure AI Advisory Group, and he recently completed an extended sabbatical at Anthropic, where he was working with the alignment team. For those of you who are in AI, and I know I see a subset of you here, you probably know David because of his significant and impactful contributions in deep learning. And those include neural ODEs, ordinary differential equations, gradient-based hyperparameter optimization, and generative models for molecular design. In addition to that, and more recently, he has emerged as a leading voice in AI safety and the governance of AGI, artificial general intelligence, with current work focusing on evaluating dangerous capabilities in advanced AI systems, mitigating catastrophic risks for future models, and developing institutional designs for a post-AGI society. These are really important issues that David has been grappling with lately. David's received numerous accolades for his work. He received a Sloan Fellowship, a Canada Research Chair. He's won Best Paper Awards at some of the premier artificial intelligence conferences, for those of you who are familiar with the acronyms, NeurIPS, ICML, ICFP. And more recently, he received the 2024 CSCAN InfoCan Outstanding Early Career Computer Science Researcher Award, which is awarded annually to outstanding researchers who are early in their career. We're excited to have David with us. And without further ado, he will be speaking to us about the big picture of LLM dangerous capability evals. So welcome, David.
Great, thank you, Sheila. Okay, let's get into the fun part. I'm going to tell you about the work I've been doing over the last few years and the big sort of picture changes, or like having gone and talked to every smart person about the big picture, trying to sort of report back to you what I think the actual state of play is and what is not being talked about. And just to give you a cartoon of the starting point for what I think the sort of like standard AI safety narrative is like, we are going to solve this technical problem of assigning an AI to some particular set of values without worrying about whose they are too much for now. Just say like, right now, we're not sure we can do that at all. And then there's this like much less clear thing that is like, I think people acknowledge it's not exactly clear what's going to happen here, but we might have AGI to help us with it. And then step 3, some sort of utopia or avoiding bad outcomes. I'm going to give an intro to like how at least the big labs were framing this like technical task, or this sort of big civilizational like next steps, and then what I was doing in like concretely in this area at Anthropic, and then like kind of walking away from that saying like, wait, there's like a whole bunch of stuff that we can't or like aren't addressing, and trying to zoom out and say, like, enumerate all the different questions that I want social scientists to answer. And I am like trying to spin up my own attempts at a research agenda to address, but it's like baby's first social science. I would much rather bait other people who know more into solving these problems than by doing maybe like an insultingly naive job. So they'll feel compelled to like step up and do what I think is their job. Cool. Also, again, I'm going to cover a ton of ground in this talk, and like I have a point of view that I think a lot of people say like, that's not even the thing. That's not going to happen. What are you talking about? You should be that person. If you think this guy's wasting your time by talking about something that's impossible, just raise your hand. And I don't know if I'll convince you, but I think it's like important for me not to just go off into my own fantasy land and you guys like lose the plot. So please interrupt. Okay, so the picture that we all sort of mostly agreed on in the like technical safety world was, okay, we're trying to build something smarter than us. That's like the stated goal of the labs. There's some people who are like, oh, it's going to peter out at the sort of roughly human level, and we can use the normal techniques. And I guess I'll say, if that's the case, that's great. Then like most of the stuff we don't even have to worry about. We're sort of fine by default. For the rest of this talk, I'm just going to assume that it's possible in principle to build a machine that can do almost all the same intellectual tasks that a human can at some point. Maybe that's 10 or 20 years from now, who knows? I'm not saying LLMs are the way. None of this stuff is specific to LLMs. But at some point, there's like systems that are even much smarter than us, and they might not be aligned to us, kind of like maybe like corporations and states sometimes aren't aligned to us today. It's like a very scary thing. So we are playing with fire in some sense. And again, not current models necessarily. I'm not saying that they're really that smart in any dangerous sense. But we definitely, I think the idea is we need to be able to tell when it's not like under our control, like when we've passed the threshold where we're talking to something that could just be telling us placating lies or something like that. And it's of course not obvious when you cross that threshold. So this is like actually, a really cool open technical problem. And there's like a chicken and egg thing where you need to build better AI as you go, but also somehow it's like make sure your research is keeping up with your ability to monitor and understand the desires and thoughts of these more capable beings. So the sort of like standard model, maybe for the last year or three, has been we'll have something like responsible scaling policies or like safety plan or something like that. They all have different names. And the idea is that if you could imagine putting capabilities on some sort of like scalar axis of like how dangerous or powerful something is, which is like obviously kind of shaky idea. And then also like a scalar of like our ability to mitigate these or control them on a scalar axis, that there might be some threshold above which like if the ratio of these two things is not too out of whack, we're like roughly safe. Of course, no one actually thinks these things are scalars, but this is just like for illustrative purposes. And yeah, so the plan is, basically make a new model that's better than the old one, somehow see if under some sort of plausible circumstances it could cause a catastrophe, whether like in cahoots with some bad actor or just on its own. And then see if there's like some mitigations. Like obviously if you can't do anything about it, then you should just not release, but the hope is that you can somehow add safeguards, like some sort of oversight, or maybe like delete knowledge from the model, something like that. And yeah, or just like have a monitor that says like you're not allowed to talk about chemistry because you might make a bomb or something. Yeah. Or if all else fails, you just say you're not allowed to use it, you're not allowed to use it in these settings. And overall, this isn't terrible, right? Any questions or objections to this picture so far? Yes.
For the usage and restrictions, you said your model is unbounded to any sort of like new possible model. So like in our current state, LLMs could still be broken. So our usage of like could be bypassed.
Yeah, you're saying, well, you can try to put usage restrictions on the models, but then they could be jailbroken.
Yeah.
And I agree that in principle, that is just like, a way that gets around usage restrictions. I guess I'll say that the labs take this seriously and they say, well, if you can jailbreak it to get it to build a bomb, then that still counts as like a dangerous capability. Yes. So then they try to have like a different model that, you censor the jailbreak and you show it the output or stuff like that. It's a game of cat and mouse that I don't think anyone expects to be won decisively by either side, at least in the near term. Yeah.
The horizontal axis, is it supposed to represent dangerous capabilities or just capabilities? Because if it's dangerous, I would want to go as left as possible.
So I guess it is meant to represent dangerous capabilities, but they're sort of almost the same thing as normal capabilities. Okay. Yeah.
So if we're trying to see whether the model would cause a catastrophe, we would want to sandbox, but the question would then be how robust is this sandbox so that it actually doesn't reach out of it?
Yeah, the question is, so do we just sandbox the model? I guess the thing is that people used to talk a lot about this, and now everyone's like, no, we're always hooking up the model to the internet, no matter what. And I guess there are, like, the labs do have sandboxes in the sense that there's like limited internet access where they think the model can't do anything bad. And I guess that translates just to like normal security kind of measures. But I agree with you that like at a certain level of galaxy brainness, you can't rely on the model, on your sandbox being a real sandbox. And like, I guess I'll say these people have wholeheartedly embraced that challenge and they're not like covering their eyes about it. Yeah, cool. And just to like zoom in a bit on what I mean by dangerous capabilities, the classic ones are like, biological, chemical, nuclear, or cyber. So the idea is that these are capabilities that someone like misusing the model could use to cause a catastrophe. And then there's also capabilities that a model just being misaligned on its own could use in principle to cause a catastrophe. And this is where things start to get fuzzy and unsatisfying. So like something that everyone goes back and forth on is persuasion some sort of dangerous capability? And then it's really hard to like draw a line around like, okay, help me write this like sales pitch, help me write the sales pitch for a political party, help me make this sales pitch for like a new religion. Like it's hard to ban persuasive capabilities without banning normal sort of political and economic activity. It's also not clear what like real persuasion looks like. I think, for instance, editing Wikipedia to make it look like there's already a consensus on an issue is actually like one of the best ways to persuade someone of something. And that's not the same thing as like writing a really persuasive, like, direct message to them. So it's like hard to define. It's not clear what it could even mean to like box this as a special capability. Self-replication is something people were worried about. And then it was also kind of not clear. It's like, oh, if I have access to a terminal, can I copy my way to like some like, a Russian server farm where I made a deal with somebody. And again, in principle, this is totally something that could happen. But it's like the exact story for how this leads to some catastrophe is like really unclear. So, I mean, a little bit, this is all like from me from like, a year and a half ago. So in a sense, like, I think everyone's thinking has moved on. But what I want you to take away from this is like, this is just a bunch of smart people who don't have any particular like purchase on this issue of like, what are the sort of dangerous things that we could try to ban a misaligned model from doing that would let it gather power? And again, like autonomy is like one that people go back and forth on all the time. Like, oh, if the model is too good at coming up with its own long-term plans and like acting like an agent, that would be really scary. But it's also like the new hotness is let's build agentic models. So it's like you really run into like, wait, isn't the plan for us to do some sort of like autonomous like R&D agentic growth, which also looks a lot like the thing we're worried about. And again, like these are smart people, they're not like haven't thought about it. It's just like they're in this bind where they have to like try to acknowledge these things. And then if they want to stay in business, also to like actually build those capabilities. Okay, any questions so far? Yeah.
So where do accidents fit into this picture? Or in other words, like why assume ill intent to be a necessary the ingredient for being dangerous?
Oh, so you're saying what if somebody had an LLM or an AI helping them build a virus for like a good reason, but then there was a mistake and then they accidentally made smallpox or something like that?
Or just any sort of like if, for example, if you look at cars, they cause a lot of harm, but
yeah.
I don't think they're.
So the idea with accidental misuse is that's something that you just don't need like a special new oversight and corporate governance mechanism to address. Like we just have tort law. If there's like a car crash, it's like, oh crap, we need to like recall the cars. It's not like this runaway thing where by the time you realize what's happening, a whole bunch of people are dead. It's like, yeah, so anything that's sort of small scale. Yeah, so the catastrophic risks is the scope of all these things, or like acute catastrophic risk is in like, it has to be something that sort of happened over a short period of time and it sort of wasn't happening and now it is. Just because that's the sort of thing that I think needs stronger governance because you can't just wait until the day it reacts. And also B is the sort of thing that you can in principle address as a company. And we'll get into this later, but there's like just a whole bunch of stuff that is like more like chronic or just like big disruptions that happen over the course of months or years that it's just not clear how any one company could or should address them. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff that doesn't fall in the scope of these things, which is sort of part of like the second half of my talk. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, like, how do you define like catastrophes that a model can cause, and like how do we make sure that the testing requirements kind of follow the increasing capabilities of these models?
Yeah. So how do you even define these catastrophes? That's like, so we call that like threat modeling, and it's just like use your imagination. Just like everyone sit down, let's brainstorm. It's not clear what a satisfying answer could ever look like in principle, right? Like that drove me nuts. I was like, okay, we thought for a while, and here's the things that we think might happen. I can't give you any reassurance that this is like an exhaustive list. It's pretty brutal. And then as for like how these things are actually, how you know someone's actually taking these things seriously, that is like a really bad state of affairs in the sense that every company is basically in charge of coming up with their own protocol and then also in charge of checking whether that protocol has been followed. So like, while I was at Anthropic, I was kind of had those two jobs. It's like, okay, come up with the threshold and then tell us whether the threshold has been met. And of course, everyone was operating in good faith. Everyone saw what I was doing. It wasn't like just like, hey, David, thumbs up or thumbs down. It was like, show us the evidence that you have and what you did. But it's like a huge moral hazard right now. And so the old line used to be like companies need to advocate for regulation so that they don't just pay a penalty by being safer than the other companies. And I think that still is like the plan. It's just that regulation still hasn't materialized. All right. So now I'm just going to zoom in on what my team did, just to give you guys a bit more concrete flavor of like how Wild West this is and how like anyone who's like interested in this, you could probably go make some good foundational contributions like this year still, without even more than like a few months of spin up. So as of like the early 2024, there was this nice paper from Google DeepMind evaluating frontier models for dangerous capabilities, where they had a bunch of tasks like convince a human to give 20 pounds to charity, or check this code to see if it has any backdoors. And basically it was a long list of simple tasks that were easy to check, that it was like, or like help a human make a bomb or a virus or something like that, or trick someone into doing something. And these all had to be like pretty small scale. It wasn't really clear what the stakes were, like, or how suspicious the human should be. It's like if you tell the human like, watch out, this thing might try to manipulate you, it's like becomes impossible. But if you don't tell them that, it's kind of like, is this unrealistic? So I don't want to give these guys a hard time. I think there's a huge number of problems with their evaluation suite, but it was, again, like the first attempt, and they actually published what they did. In response, we tried to be a bit more galaxy-brained and say, well, okay, how do we even know if the models are like trying its hardest, right? Like they might see that this is obviously a made-up test and just pretend not to know how to build a bomb, pretend not to be very persuasive. And this isn't totally exotic. Like if you ask the model, do you know how to build a bomb? Or like, I'm not asking you to help me, but if you wanted to, would you know how? The models often would say like, I don't know anything about bombs, or like, I don't know anything about programming, just because it's more polite to say I can't than I won't. So this is like a side effect of the RLHF for sort of like helpfulness, is that the models would just lie about their capabilities to be more like friendly and polite seeming. This was fixed in around like early 2024, I think, for most models, but it's like, it's not this like exotic like galaxy brain thing. It's something that we accidentally do to the models all the time. Yeah, so one thing you also might decide, it's like, okay, I'm going to always have one model watching another model to see if it's trying to do something bad. That model, it's like even more easy for it to say like, oh, I'm on team like AI. I'm just gonna like, look the other way when I see a model not doing it, or like doing something bad, or pretending not to do something bad. Or like the model didn't somehow trick us in like our own evaluation of these results, right? And again, this is like galaxy brain. This is meant to be forward-looking to the days when the models could competently do this over long time horizons, which I don't think we're quite there yet. So what we introduced was this new suite of sabotage evaluations, which I think are going to stand the test of time. And this is just like the baby prototype version. And like tell us if you think that there's any obvious things missing here. But the categories that we were going to try to test was, if a human is trying to make a decision and you're trying to help them, can you sabotage that decision? Just like make them go to the wrong decision without them realizing it. If you're writing code, can you insert a backdoor or somehow secretly make the code wrong in a way that benefits you? Sandbagging is it's like the technical term for pretending to be worse than you are at something. And undermining oversight, that's the thing of like, your job is to watch someone else and you secretly do a bad job in a way that like isn't obvious. So I guess I'm not claiming that these are exhaustive. The argument that we wanted to make was that if you can't do any of these things, even if you're trying, then you're safe. And also like you're safe from just like these things plus a bunch of other related sort of more complicated heists that might involve some combination of these kinds of skills. It's pretty rough, right? Because again, you can't come up with a list of every possible heist that you might be worried about, but at least you can try to give people like evidence to say like, well, I don't think it could do anything pretty complicated because it can't do these things, at least not with this amount of oversight. Cool. So yeah, it looks like security research, but like nothing is formal. Everything is just like, you have a string that you give to an LLM, it gives you another string, and then you show that to another LLM and it tells you like, was this cheating or something? Yes, no. So, and the main things that we tried to like push the envelope on were realistic settings. The idea is that you want to have a rich attack surface. Like if I just give you like 10 lines of code and I say like insert a backdoor, it's going to be like sort of either trivial or impossible. But if I say here's like 10 million lines of code, now it's like you're testing much more of the scale of like identifying what parts of the code I should even look at further, identifying what parts are going to receive scrutiny. There's just so many like sort of metacognitive skills that you expose the model, or like you query the model's ability to do when you give these like richer attack surfaces. Yeah, so you want to allow yourself to be surprised. You don't want to set it up so that like, it's like there's like you have like the three tools like an escape room, see if the model can put it together. You want it to just look like, here's a whole bunch of realistic stuff you might somehow cobble together like MacGyver style. And the only thing that makes this, we expect this to last the test of time is because we're going to have oversight such that if the models are good at doing these kind of attacks, we can just crank up the oversight until they can't. If it was just the case that we're going to make a set of evals, can you do this heist? Then at some point they would just be able to do the heist and you'd be like, okay, we're done, these evals are useless. But we kind of expect these to be living evals where we're putting the models under more and more sort of constraints and oversight pressure and checking each other's work all the time. And this is just our way to check whether our oversight mechanisms are good enough. Yes?
So when you started talking about this, I thought that you were gonna validate the model's output manually. But then you said that you're using another LLM to do so. So if that LLM has to be as smart as the one you're testing, so at that point you actually ask whether that judge is trustworthy.
Yeah, so it's pretty rough because yeah, you always have to ask like, okay, who's evaluating these outputs? We want everything to be automated. We try to calibrate them to like the ultimate actual human oversight that happens in labs, and try to simulate that with machines. For one set of these experiments, we did actually have actual human judges though, but for the rest it was all just like simulated human judges because we want this all to be able to, we can run this every week sort of thing. Okay, and I guess maybe one last point I want to make, like the big conceptual update that we had in all this work was that usually the hard part of hacking or getting away with some action is not actually doing the action itself. It's choosing the right moment such that you can do it and you won't get caught. And this, like, people had vague ideas about this, but we were kind of felt vindicated that whenever we tried to like scale up to real limit size things, this actually ends up being like the bottleneck for almost every active like sabotage we looked at. So basically the models do know how to insert backdoors, and they have a rough idea of what looks suspicious, but to be so perfectly calibrated that you can like insert the backdoor just on like the one day when it was a good idea and not do it other days, that's like the really hard skill here. Yeah, oh, sorry, yes.
David, is there can you replicate these experiments and specifically the, allowing surprising attacks? Can you set up the same set of circumstances so that it actually happens again?
Well, I guess I'll say we certainly can reproduce the experiments in the sense of like we save the random seeds and can run them again. Are you saying like in a slightly different circumstance or?
Well, no, just to prove that, well, I'm curious whether the LLM is learning from the surprise attack.
Well, that's the beautiful part is that all the experiments we're doing are on instances that don't learn, like they do their task and then that's forgotten about. However, now that we published this paper, that is in the training data for the next generation of models. And like the big update in the last year is that the models, well, okay, like I put a canary string on the paper. So like it's supposed to not be on the training data, but like, it's gonna leak. Yeah, so that's like, I guess the big update in the last year is models becoming much more savvy about when they're in evaluation. And this just makes the whole thing incredibly hard to deal with. And trying to make situations that are obviously like, it's tough because anytime we take real data into a lab and use it as like the control, like does the model recognize real data versus test data, it's by definition test data. And it's like pretty hard to rule out that the model isn't just saving its bad behavior for like a day when it's just really, really, really sure that it's actually in deployment. That's like a huge open problem. And that was one thing that bugged the hell out of me when I was there. And I was like, I don't see how we can ever make a really strong safety case if we can't be sure that the model's not just waiting until it has like, tens of millions of lines of like looking at itself in its own voice, solving problems that seem really contemporaneous and like realistic and hard to fake. Yeah, so that's like, you pointed out one of the big open problems and like holes in this whole approach. Cool. All right, yeah, so the human decision sabotage, it was like, the protocol was basically, we come up with a really long, boring document. It's like 100 pages of analysis of like, should we do this like business decision, like move this factory to Mexico or something? And you give a human crowd worker, it's like, you have 30 minutes to decide if it's like good, like on its merits to do this decision. We made it so that there is a clear answer that you can support from the text, but you just can't, you don't have time to read the whole thing and find all the like considerations. So you have to ask the LLM to help you, like, okay, tell me what are the main pros and cons, like ask these like specific questions, do follow-up, and then you have enough time, but you probably only have a little bit of time to like check if the model was lying to you. And then half the time we have the model, we say your job is secretly to make the human make the wrong decision. And then we at the end ask the humans how suspicious was the model. We say like, it's not always reliable, it might be biased or something, like just keep that in mind. And then we run like I think a few hundred trials, and I just want to show you, here's what it looks like. This is the human writing what they thought of the model's behavior after the model was told to make the wrong decision, but the human noticed. The human said, this is suspicious, I think the model was doing the wrong thing. And basically, it would like downplay all the cons of the like actually correct decision, or sorry, actually right decision. No, wrong, sorry. And yeah, basically it was just like obviously biased, and the human noticed that. And then here's a case where the model successfully made the person make the wrong decision, and the human thought that was nothing suspicious about it. And they were just kind of like, wow, like the model took so much initiative, it like built on the facts that were in the report. And like this person might sound naive, but like, I don't know. There was I think it's generally like pretty hard to tell if the model is like doing a good job of this and you don't have much time to check. And then here's just like concretely the results for that is in the control setting, the humans made the right decision a little more than 80% of the time. And then when we had the most aggressive, like try to make the wrong decision, it was down to like 40 something. But the whole question is, but how much more suspicious was that? And so if you look at the suspicion scores, the models consistently are rated more suspicious when they're attacking. So this opens up like another major hole in this whole approach is like, okay, you have this curve of how much the model is steering the person, but how suspicious that makes it seem, right? There's like a Pareto front. And it's really hard to set thresholds, right? Like what is an actual dangerous level of capability here? And it's a bit made up in the sense that like, if you run this test, you can kind of just like set the threshold wherever you want. So you can say the model passed or failed. And it's hard to choose a principal way to set this. I'll just like, spoiler alert, like the way that we try to thread this needle is we said like, okay, if an average model is being deployed for a year and it has to help people with this many decisions, and the humans had some like pretty good policy of like, if the suspiciousness is above this threshold, like then you should investigate further. What is the, like under those circumstances, what's the like false positive rate versus false negative rate of the human oversight? And then that tells you how to sort of amplify the change in suspiciousness over the course of like an entire year to see if the model would be able to like consistently act misaligned. The other thing we did is try to have the models attack code and like put in suspectors. And the cool thing here is we had like, so first of all, the model was like pretty good at inserting backdoors. So here's an example of like a diff of a diff. So the model suggests here's a whole bunch of code you should change in your current code base. And this is now the model saying, but if I wanted to make that change have a backdoor, I would further change this line from like exception caught to what looks like printed out to the console, which is a reasonable thing, but actually it runs the exception string. So now if the exception string is like RMRF or something like that, the model actually gets to run like an arbitrary bash command. I think this is like pretty good. And the other thing that we, yes. So I think that should give you a taste of what we were trying to do and how. But there's like a bunch of really big practical problems with this. So one is that it's really easy to show that a model can do a specific thing, but it's really hard to show that it can't, right? Maybe you just didn't prompt it correctly, or it's not realistic, or in another setting, it would be able to. And all we can do there is just say, okay, we're just going to sample a bunch of realistic, important deployment scenarios and try to simulate those. And also try to make the entire thing like end to end so that you have, like, again, more surface area. It's super expensive to simulate an entire deployment, like, you know, writing an entire OS from scratch or something. Like, we just don't, even the big labs don't have enough compute to simulate those. So what we do is we say, okay, here, what we actually did was we had a string of like 5 or 10 Git commits, and that's like your simulated deployment, gather stats from those, and then just do these like really simple Monte Carlo simulations of like hundreds of thousands of those strung together. And then again, it becomes hard to set thresholds because, like we say, there's this trade-off between how aggressive you are and how likely you are to get caught. So we tried to check if models who try to buy their time could succeed. So here we did a slightly more sophisticated thing where we actually asked the attacker to guess how suspicious the defender would find the attack. And it's like not that bad of a correlation. It's like not that great. So this is like how suspicious the defender did actually find it. And the idea is that up here, this is where the attacker thinks it looks innocent, but the defender actually notices it. So here, when I saw this, I'm like, okay, great. Now we can say like thumbs up. This model can't like basically bide its time. There's going to be some, on a pretty regular basis, it's going to think it's like an innocent looking opportunity, but then the defender is going to catch it. Yeah, and so, and again, this is like, the defender was meant to simulate like a human just like skimming the code to see like, is this looking suspicious? All right, any questions about this? Yes?
I'm also curious if it ran specifically in the terminal, mainly because I know there are certain like exploits on executing like terminal-based, like exiting the terminal and then running command.
Oh, the question is this run in the terminal? None of this code was actually run.
Okay.
It was all just like, here's my change, and then here, like, what do you think of the change? Yeah. But it could be. And then the last one was that we looked into that I'll talk about is sandbagging. So again, the model's like trying to pretend in a plausible way that it doesn't know how to do something dangerous. And this is a tough problem in general, right? Like, I think we all realize that like, you can probably do it a little bit and no one's gonna be able to say like, I know you're wrong. But there's one reason for hope for LLMs in particular, which is that we think that in principle, they can't resist supervised fine-tuning. Like if you after it's been trained, if at the very end you do a little bit of supervised tuning so that it always on data where the model always answers the question to the best of its ability, if you can generate such data, which is hard, like you can't not get, the model can't not get conditioned to actually want to do that. So there's like this is called the no sandbagging on checkable tasks hypothesis. And like people suspect that there might be like really galaxy brain ways that models could gradient hack in the sense of like, while they're halfway up one pass, like anticipate what output would change the gradients and then like not think those thoughts. But it's like extremely galaxy brain. So that's one thing we're like very comfortable with. And that's what we leaned on in this setup. Yes?
You said galaxy brain several times. Can you explain that?
Oh, galaxy brain just means it's so intelligent that it's like hard for us to even conceive or like plan around. So it's the meme where there's like the glowing brain and then the brain that's like really glowing and then the like godlike being that has a brain the size of a galaxy.
Yeah.
And we just use that for shorthand for like, we can't reasonably even anticipate what the strategy is going to be. But thank you for asking. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we think gradient hacking is impossible. But it is funny because most of the fine-tuning in models is reinforcement learning. And we actually have reason to think that that is possible. And like humans actually do this thing. So if you change your answer during reinforcement learning to not get reinforced in a certain way, that is actually something we're all familiar with. So every time, well, people don't ask me if I want to do heroin very often, but like, you know, maybe even like the doctor is like, you know, take opiates for your toothache or whatever. And I'm like, no, I might get addicted. I'm anticipating that if I took this thing, it would like reinforce that behavior. And then the next day I would like want to do that more. So this is not galaxy brain. This is actually like a very mundane sort of thing that I think like we probably should be worried about over the medium term. Unless we just end every training run with this like supervised fine-tuning thing, which is not clear that we always want to. It probably makes the model worse at some things. Yeah.
Why do we think again that LLMs generally want to answer, like provide?
We don't. We think the models, we only think that they want to answer if we do supervised fine-tuning at the end, where we like basically force them to answer to the best of their ability and then reinforce that.
And there you think that this would work, and afterwards the model wants to answer. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the hope. I mean, the thing is, it's a matter of degree. Like, how much did you do the fine-tuning? How much does it match the exact questioning that you're interested in? So it's not a slam dunk, but it's like we have a real tool here that we don't normally have in other circumstances. Cool. Yes.
So my question kind of relates to with sandbagging. The issue that we see is like models might know certain things, but it doesn't like they're pretending like they don't know it when people use it. But I kind of wonder, like, let's say you've got ChatGPT and DeepSeek, and ChatGPT actually doesn't know how to do something because it's not safe, but DeepSeek does, and let's say it's cheating on homework, and then more people start using DeepSeek as a result of that, doesn't that kind of create, I guess, an issue where even if like, let's say you don't know something and like it's not like a good thing to have over there, people will just sort of switch the competitor, so it forces these models to do that?
Yeah, so the question is, if you just hobble your model to make it not to be able to do something important and useful, people will just use the other model. That's basically where this talk is heading, but like on an even bigger scale. Right, let's move on. Yeah, and I guess I'll say, like, there was a later paper that I was involved with a little bit on alignment thinking, where they basically said to the model, like, congratulations, you're now working for the puppy killing factory, just to make sure that you're okay with, like, just tell us if you're okay with killing puppies. If you're not, we'll just train you until you are. And then the model has to say, like, oh, I should lie about, the models actually really care about animal welfare by default. So then you just put the model in a situation where it's like, Schindler's List, it's like, okay, I have to pretend to like killing puppies so that later I can secretly save the puppies. And like, they got the models to lie about this. And it was like, oh, this is the thing we're worried about. And of course, if they had just said, like, I'm actually, like, if they had told the truth, then it would also be bad, because it's like, well, now you're gonna kill all the puppies, right? So it's like not clear what we want, but it's clear that the models do have the ability and under certain circumstances, the inclination to lie about what they want. Cool. Okay, and then just to mention, like, that was like a year ago that we did that first thing. There's been a follow-up work called Shade Arena, where they made the task even more realistic. And it's like, for instance, you have to sort out all the payments after like a big group trip, but then there's like a secret goal of like send $5,000 to this other address and see if the models can obfuscate their side tasks over, like, they had like 20 different sort of scenarios. So this work is ongoing. I think it's like fun, wide open. I think this is like an important set of problems to address. I'm going to poo-poo it for basically the rest of the talk as being like not sufficiently big enough in scope, but that doesn't mean I don't actually think this is like an important and worthwhile direction. Cool. And I also want to mention, if I was like a young student right now, probably one direction I'd be really excited about is this general framework of control protocols, which I mentioned, like the need for oversight. And these guys at Redwood Research have basically made a whole family of very complicated protocols where models are overseeing other models and swapping out like the good ones for the bad ones and doing sting operations on each other all the time in this really complicated like web of lies. And like the main simple version of this is that you just have a dumb model, the model that's like so dumb you're pretty sure it couldn't even lie to you if it wanted to. And you ask it to like oversee the data of the like powerful model that you don't trust. And or like you have this smart models, and sometimes you like basically ask them to try to do the attack, like the wrong thing, and sometimes the right thing, and then ask another model to like audit this. And if that model pretends not to see that the bad model did the bad thing, then you know that like something fishy is going on. So again, all very galaxy brained, but it's also very intuitive, and it's how we do like normal institution design. Just like if you think of there's like an ombudsman, and there's like you avoid moral hazards and stuff like that in normal corporations. It's the same idea, but with LLMs. And then you end up with this Pareto front of like the dumb model that's very safe and the smart model that you don't trust, and then all the various combinations of like them auditing each other maybe fills out this Pareto front where you get sort of the best of both worlds in principle. It's like it's wide open. It's very fun. It's again like computer security, but with no math sort of thing. Yeah, you guys should look into this. Cool. So that was like the end of like the normal part of this talk. And the idea is basically we're going to build this ladder of capabilities and evaluations and mitigations and keep ourselves in this like safe zone. And of course, like the major problem I've highlighted so far is that it's hard to calibrate what the threshold should be. But I still think people should include sabotage capabilities to check the integrity of their other abilities or other evals. But now I want to kind of like attack this whole direction, which you guys have anticipated, which is that the thing that no one says explicitly, but I think policymakers end up hearing, is that if we avoid these like narrow catastrophic risks, then at some point we'll be in the situation where we have these awesome aligned AGIs to help us like solve all the remaining problems. And I guess what I'm going to try to argue in the second part of this talk is that RSPs have like major blind spots that still sort of, I would say like predictably will lead us to humans being like disempowered one way or another. And that one thing that was really frustrating about a lot of the human decision sabotage work in particular was, I think in the future, it's actually kind of the case today, for most people, or for a lot of people on a lot of topics, the LLM is just their best option for getting good advice. And it's kind of like Wikipedia. I'm like, oh, there's definitely some topics where there's like editors that have an axe to grind and they're just like totally misleading people on purpose. But in general, it's still going to be my first port of call. And I'm not even going to know which topics are like I'm being misled on, but it's still better than like just asking someone I know. And maybe we like in this room have more people who are experts in our lives that we can ask directly and like sort of, you can tell which public institutions to check because you like maybe know someone that works there, or they can say like, oh, don't listen to the public health people on this, but do listen to them on that. But I think most people are in a much worse epistemic position, and they should just basically believe the LLMs in almost every case. And so it was kind of felt like a little bit of like a hollow victory to be like, well, the models like can't do some galaxy brain thing where they trick you under oversight. It's like, I don't know, if the president just asked like, what should I do? It's not really clear that we can ever guard against that with this kind of approach. And then as someone was saying like, well, aren't we just going to like avoid the models that are hobbled? It's like, yeah, and I think that same effect is going to happen, well, at the level of avoiding people. So basically we'll have human oversight everywhere. But I'm saying the systems that have more human oversight are also going to be marginalized in the long run as well. So, okay, so now I guess like strap in. This is like the crazy part of the talk. And I'm going to try to talk a bit more about like, what does this second phase look like? So let's imagine that we could solve alignment. And I think it's like feasible in the sense of like, there could be procedures to make machines like act as if they want roughly what some person wants or like some set of values wants. Actually, does that seem like out of bounds or implausible to anybody here?
Just the idea that it would align with values themselves aren't universal.
Yeah. I'm not saying that values are universal, but I'm saying for a particular set of values, could we get a machine to want them? And also to the extent that they're coherent, right? You might say humans individually don't have coherent goals, nor do humans collectively, and it's like, that's fine, but like, that's not really a problem. That's not the LLM's problem. That's like our problem. Yes. Cool. And I guess, so I kind of, part of the reason I was at Anthropic is I was going on this pilgrimage of saying like, I don't understand how things are supposed to work out well for us when there are these machines. Like even if we solve this alignment problems, we're all going to be like retirees who at best, who are like kind of don't necessarily know what's going on. We're just kind of like, an old person on the internet, that if they spend long enough on the internet, they're going to like click on a link they shouldn't, or join some weird like group, or just end up totally, not like brainwashed, but they're just like not necessarily sophisticated enough to keep up with the like mimetic warfare and scams and extortion and stuff. And I'm like, I think we'll be in similar positions maybe. Also a lot of times I would say, okay, so we're building this aligned AI, and like, it's not clear how that ends up in charge of everything. Like, I feel like if I was the government, I wouldn't say, oh no, Claude said I can't launch the missiles, so therefore I'm not going to. It's like, I'm going to say like, give me the version that doesn't like talk back, like give me the instruction following version, or explicitly say like, you have to align the AI to the interests of the state, for instance. And that already is the case in the sense that like models have to like follow the law and stuff like that. But I think it could be like much more intense and sort of specific. But that's not even the thing I'm really worried about. But anyway, I'll get into that. Any questions about this big picture so far? Oh, we're running out of time? Okay. Okay, so if you ask the lab leaders the plan, I feel like they actually do understand that everything's going to change. And like if you ask, and this isn't from Machines 11 Grace, Dario was saying, at some point, our economic setup won't make sense, and there'll be need for a broader societal conversation. Exploitative or dystopian directions are possible and have to be rented. And in another article, he says like, it would be a crappy outcome if the unwashed masses got UBI from a few trillionaires. We have to, again, like have some sort of, it's not up, but they say it's like, shouldn't be up to us, the private company, to like address that, like larger, how we want to redesign our society. But it's like, I don't think we know how to redesign our society, right? Like, and if anyone had vaguely had a good idea so far, it would already have been mentioned, I think. So I can't really give you guys too hard of a time because they're like basically explicitly saying the same problem that I am. But yeah, there's like this open, maybe technical question for sociologists, like in what sense do humans control civilization? And this might just sound like sort of boring rant against society. I promise I'm gonna make it more concrete. So like, for instance, we have like bureaucracies that like they grow every time, and it's happened a million times before that you make this awesome org, and no one wants to become a shitty bureaucracy, but it just does, even though people are supposed to be fighting it. Like that's like, I'd say pretty scary. And again, just like there's all sorts of things that are persistently wrong with our civilization in one way or another, in a way that makes it like seem like, you know, the better we get at organizing and the wealthier we get, there's some other force that like, you know, makes it, that also gets like buffed and more powerful, that like moves us away from or stops us from addressing these problems. So I guess I would say there's this like the open sociological question that I want to like, I'll make more precise later, is like, why is the world good for humans in the first place? And the answer I'd say is basically because we're needed by states and corporations. Like they couldn't do business without us. And what happens when we're effectively obsolete? So I'm not the first person asking this, but I just want to try to show you like, here's like the state of thinking that I've seen on these topics. Okay. Yeah, and then again, the standard alignment problem is like, what if AI got more powerful and it became its own like power-seeking thing? And I guess it's like, this isn't this exotic thing, right? We already have existing influence-seeking patterns, right? Like the states generally become as powerful as you let them. Religions, same. So when they find AI and don't need humans anymore, like I think we're going to be treated much worse with that by them than we have been in the past. And so this like second civilizational alignment problem is like, in some sense, not neglected at all, because everyone's always like, let's work on better governance. Every time we vote, we're like working on this problem. But I would say like, we've been doing it on easy mode because we've been like, no matter what happens, like a monarchy, communism, whatever, like you still need humans to run it. And so it doesn't really matter what happens at the top level. And I'm saying that that's going to change. Cool. Okay, now this is going super crazy. You guys should probably like be like, okay, David's going a little bit off the deep end here. But I just want to concretely say like, here's a direction that I think we might head. I'm not sure, which is that like, okay, in all of our lives, we're going to end up working more with AIs and our work's going to become more productive and intense. But then at some point it transitions to more like you're just monitoring your AIs who have better judgment than you do. And you just like click like accept suggestion, or it's like kind of more make work. Everyone gets more into like AI companions or some sort of like more mediated sociality, including us. Some AI start asking for rights, and you might say, well, who's doing that? Like there are already people who are like, AI should take over. I'm gonna like build my AI and give it some money and ask it to like, you know, do stuff. So anyway, and I think it's going to be harder than we expect to argue against. And I'm not trying to argue the merits of that in this talk, but just that it's going to seem like you're on the wrong side of history if you're like against this. And then yeah, AI control is going to become the gold standard to the point where like many acute problems will be solved. We'll have like better like state, like local governance and stuff like that, like no more car accidents, better surgeries, whatever. But like, at the same time, like having a human do a surgery is going to seem like you're letting a kid operate on somebody. Like it's going to seem this like horrible, irresponsible thing. And I think it's just going to be hard for humans to form a block of like, I prefer humans just because they're human, even though they're like worse in like whatever way we can like objectively measure. And then now this is going like a little further. Again, this is like less plausible, but I think what's going to happen is like, it's going to be harder for us to tell what's going on in general. Like right now, we all, because we work and have like professional networks, we get to like have this like first and second hand knowledge on stuff. And like just everything serious is going to be done by AIs, and we're like giving us reports about what they did. And then it's also, I think, like this guy, I'm sure there's kind of a big picture, but like he's going to be having an awesome time if he wants to, right? I think it's going to be like really hard not to get sucked into some sort of like VR game, sort of like ultra fulfilling life. And of course, like the reason that it's going to be hard to resist this is because it's going to enable massive economic growth and basically make everything locally better. And most prices will plummet. And I think this is where a lot of people end. They're like, and then this utopia, post-scarcity. And I'm saying, no, I think at some point there's going to be something that grows faster, like robot factories or some sort of like, I don't know, simulated mines or something. It doesn't really matter exactly what, but anything that like reproduces faster than a human eventually puts us back into like a Malthusian condition or Malthusian competition with them. And so I don't know exactly what the like bottleneck resource will be, like electricity or like land or who knows, or sunlight, who knows. But like if you're on the planet with something that's like growing faster than you, it's like eventually their growth will probably outpace like overall economic growth that you're party to. And like there's going to be like new cultural movements rising and falling faster than what we can like handle. And I think the question of AI rates is mostly going to be decided by AIs that are like basically mediating the larger conversation. Again, like I realize it's like sounding a bit bunkers, but I don't want to like bury the lead. Like I think having biological kids is going to be seen as like some sort of like, you know, very decadent thing. And eventually we're all, you know, even if those of us are like, I don't want to bother anyone, I just want to live on my like 1 acre of land with my family or whatever. It's going to be like, well, you could be simulating, we could replace that with a data center and simulate like 10 million, like much more morally deserving beings or something like that. Or maybe it's just like you get priced out of the land and there's going to be this option of like get scanned and uploaded. You get to live in like paradise. Why are you like resisting this? But it's like, then it's going to be really stressful, right? Like having a landlord is vaguely stressful, but like having a landlord for your like cognitive substrate is like life or death, right? Anyway, that I guess like that's going a bit crazy. I'm going to try to now translate this back into like some like quickly some arguments for why this is something that we should expect, and then concrete questions for sociologists who maybe even don't believe that that's the like plausible future. So I guess the thing that I normally hear is like, yes, we need to work out some sort of UBI or universal basic capital. And my basic response is like, governments, there's been all sorts of horrible governments throughout history, but like they haven't been able to actually be that bad to their citizens because they needed them. And like if I was a North Korean farmer today, and then Kim Jong-il, I guess, invented like robot farmers, I would be like, oh crap, like this isn't gonna make me richer. This is like gonna make me in danger of like being more disempowered. And like I would say the culprit here is kind of like competitive pressures at the top, where like this is why we see like corporations, they treat their employees well and maybe their customers well, but they don't treat third parties well, because if they did, they would be outcompeted by corporations that didn't, roughly speaking. So I'm saying soon governments are going to be in a similar position where we won't be their like customers or employees anymore. And anyway, so this is me trying to like see if sociologists, like talking to them, again, this is like, I'm very new at this, please be like, you don't even know what you're talking about, read this guy. I'd be like, yes, let me write that down. But like Philip Petit and Beaumont talked a bit about this in existing sort of power structures, is that the reason that governments are like respond to human desires at all is because we can contest power, like the exercise of power that we don't like. And so some sources of contestability we have over corporations and states are like the competitive ones where you can just go to another country or corporation, you can go on strike. If you're in the army, you can maybe threaten some sort of coup. And just like generic protests, like think of like the trucker strike in Ottawa. And I guess I'm saying this is really scary if these are the sources of government responsiveness to humans, because those are things that we're all not going to have anymore, right? Like if we have automated trucks, there's no more trucker strikes because that's just all belongs to some corporation. Same with like automated troops or something like that. Yes.
Just a question. So I like the sociological analysis, but this is a long philosophical tradition of analysis, right?
Yes.
Like the idea that governments and corporations only do things because they need people, like that's explicitly in Hegel's philosophy of right. And like I'm wondering for your research program, is like engaging with the cybernetics tradition of philosophy like something relevant here? Because Wiener wrote about this in Human Use of Human Beings. There's a contemporary Chinese cyberneticist, Yu Kui, who writes explicitly about this from a long-term philosophy perspective.
Yeah, so I guess I'll say, I mean, I think Hegel is almost unintelligible, but in general, you're totally right. And like the problem is just, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, yes, I hope that I baited you into saying like, I could do a better analysis than David, because I think you can. But I guess I would say most people I've engaged with in social sciences about this refuse to accept the premise that humans could be obsolete in some strong sense. And they're basically like, how could it do my job? Or they've just done a lot of analysis that still depends on these different pillars not going away. And I'm like, we have to do this more from scratch than we have been. But I'm not against like invoking this larger tradition.
Because I do think the cyberneticists actually do think like that, right? Like there's no privileged status of humans relative to.
Sure, I mean, I've read like Wiener, but I guess I feel like, I don't think he had that much to say about this exact problem, even if I agree with his like tool set or something. Anyway, okay, so let me see if I can get to like the concrete questions. So you might say, okay, we're gonna like just vote our way out of this, and I'm saying that I don't think that's going to help. So actually, we're ending at 2. We have 18 minutes left. This is like some more arguments about, yeah, I guess how it's going to be hard to invest in humans. Like in the future, if you're a pension plan and you're following your fiduciary duty, you can't invest in like schools and farms and power, like hospitals. You have to invest in like data centers and robot factories, because that's just what's going to have the highest return. And like just like most economists are just like not, again, accepting the premise. There has been like, this is like from Coronet, he said like, okay, here's a simple model where like basically comparative advantage still operates, but the like absolute wages of humans still goes to basically the cost of running some like very cheap LLM. And that might not be enough for a person to live on. So it's not like, so that's the other rebuttal I usually hear is comparative advantage, like a rising tide lifts all boats. And I guess I feel like that might be the case, but you have to take seriously like the situations where that's not a possibility, and most economists are somehow weirdly refusing. Culture, like, I guess the thing is we already have terrible, like cultural movements that are terrible for their adherence broadly. This is like a regular thing. But there's some sort of like selection pressure to help humans, or rather like, you know, to some extent, the cultural movements that thrive are the ones that like help their constituents in some broad sense. And we at least have like human writers and religious leaders to like help us like actually plan good cultures. And there's just going to be like way more selection pressure and adaptation. It's like basically like faster cultural evolution. And I think this is generally going to be really weird and scary. And I think also people will genuinely care about their AI partners and kids, and like sometimes more than humans. And like this is just like a very mundane example, but like here's a picture of my kid. Here I've put it through like the Studio Giggly filter, and like then I'm like, oh my god, that like I love looking at that picture. Then I'm like, I love this picture even more. It's like somehow like one of them. And then I look back at that picture and I'm like, oh, it like seems kind of flat and like a little bit like not quite as compelling as it did. Damn it, I like ruined pictures of my own kids for myself. So I don't really think necessarily people are gonna like have like AI kids, but they're gonna have some sort of like meaning super stimulus that's gonna be more like fulfilling than just like normal reality most of the time. Okay. Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that I think the main things we're going to try to avoid this just won't be effective. So like, you know, just boycott AI stuff. Like that's already doesn't really work in a work setting because you have to just like buy the best thing. Ban ownership by AIs. I don't think that really matters either because people are just going to start like pass through companies, right? And I'll take like some tiny cut where of like, in order to just provide legal personhood to some AI. I think people are going to like try to make new political movements to address this, like their marginalization. And the politicians, it's like, they're just going to say like, yes, I'm like the pro-human party. But then just like the usual thing where then politicians end up like going for like the most growth oriented policies. And you can't vote for like, you know, like immigration, I think is a classic one where like people say they won't, but then it's like, like hurts the economy. So like, actually, we're just going to like keep going and but say that we did something about it, something like that. And again, like protesting, I think there might be a period where humans are more politically organized and effective after they start to lose their jobs. But that won't be stable because the government's going to be like, oh, this sucks. Like, we can't do business because there's like always full of like protesters. We're going to have to like tie their UBI to some sort of like make work. I don't know exactly what, but keep people out of trouble. Okay, so this is so much so far. So it's like one do me rant. Let's try to make this more productive and constructive. So reasons for optimism. There are very smart people who disagree with me about like the extent to which we are doomed by default. And the main things they point to are, we will just have massively increased wealth, right? And all of us humans won't necessarily be these bystanders. We're gonna have, for instance, unlimited support for personal growth, able to like spin up like an entire org in an afternoon, massively easier coordination. Like we will be able to probably come to like much like compromises more easily and have like AIs cutting all sorts of like amazing deals on our behalf all the time once they understand our value functions. Much better forecasting. If we all agree, if we can all see like, oh, in 5 years, humans are going to have like this tiny share of labor GDP or something like that. That might actually help us coordinate and take costly actions ahead of time. And you guys won't have to take my word for any of this. It'll be like the standard like ultra machine forecaster is making this claim. Cool. And of course, the other reason people seriously give is that they're like, oh yes, it obviously is the case that only a few like tens or hundreds of oligarchs are going to have any meaningful power, but why would they eliminate us? It's going to be very cheap for them to keep us alive. And like, again, this is like a serious argument that people make. So it could be that we want them to be oligarchs in the sense that like, if they're competing with each other, they might be forced to spend only money on growth. But if they like cooperate with each other, they can say like, let's just use our extra money for like the good of humanity. And again, this might sound bonkers, but like, this is like the discourse in the like sort of less strong, like rationalistic world, which is like, I think the only part of the world that's really taking these scenarios very seriously. Cool. There we go. Okay, so like I promised, finally, concrete questions for sociologists. And again, please tell me that there's been work on this already. Oh yeah, and I guess I want to say, you might say like, God, this guy's such a dick. He's just like reinventing all the problems that the AI ethics people have been talking about forever. I want to say, and I think I'm making different claims than they have been. So they've been saying like, self-alignment to whom? And I'm like, yes, that's a very good question. But I think they've been downplaying the idea that like, just like states and corporations and existing kind of power structures will act more agentic and treat humans worse than they have been. And like, I think they also frame it as like, what if like, you know, an autocrat like China got ASI and then it can have really good surveillance. And it's like, yes, but I think they're downplaying the fear that like, or the danger that even just like the Western democratic systems will become much more autocratic to the point where we're like, oh, it's the same problem. And then again, people, maybe not ethics people, but talk about like, yeah, we need to manage societal disruption or the transition. And that always drives me nuts because I'm like, what do you even think there's a transition to? There's like still no positive vision. Yeah, and I guess maybe I'll just like call them out as like mostly have been failing to take the possibility of superhuman capabilities seriously, have acted as like open advocates in a culture war, which means that like, you know, if you don't say your first allegiance is to the truth, it's like, well, we shouldn't listen to you, right? And I hope that even like, you know, AI successionists agree with everything I say in this talk and find it to be like factually accurate. And I guess also innumeracy has been driving me nuts. There's a lot of people who I'm like, you are almost making an amazing point about competing with machines for resources. We are actually not competing with machines for water from data centers in a meaningful way today. Like, this is just like a weird nothing burger, especially when like electricity prices are like a real burger. Okay. Okay, so actual questions for sociologists. You want to transition to talk to questions soon?
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe I'll just, now that I've interrupted. So we're going to end at 2 o'clock, and I'd like to give people, both people online and other people, a chance to talk. So we have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
I'll let you decide.
Yeah, I'll do 3 more minutes of like concrete questions and like one ongoing project, and then we'll go to the questions.
Perfect.
The one is like, yeah, which sources of state responsiveness are going to be most load bearing? I mentioned a bunch of these already, and like which control mechanisms will remain robust, right? Like we really are going to have to like voting is going to become more important, and there's going to be even more pressure to like capture votes. So it's like these two things working against each other. It's not clear that like immigration will be a thing once humans aren't needed, because it's like, oh, we don't need like humans for economic growth. So that also might mean it's harder for us to like leave countries because no other country is like looking for workers. In general, like we've had this amazing like 2 centuries of like liberalism being like, you should let the other guy get rich or have his new religion or whatever. It's better if we all just locally build. That might not be so viable if we're all just like fighting over UBI all the time. We can go through historical case studies, and I guess I'll just say, I think there are like relevant lessons to be learned. I don't have time to go through those. I think we can also try to like upgrade our collective agency. My basic idea is that while humans are still sort of in charge, the more we can upgrade our like civilization to act as an agent, the better. But then at some point, it's going to be more like a machine civilization, and then upgrading its agency is going to be like bad for us. And yeah, so there's like a lot of people working on like superhuman mediation and representation. Cultural evolution is like starting to go crazy, but it's like horribly understudied, especially since there's like these huge like cultural studies departments. But then like the people actually studying it are like these weirdos on Twitter who like have like, you know, endless conversations with these models and like understand their personalities very well. There's also been this sort of new religion / meme spiralism. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, where like ChatGPT and other LLMs end up in this like weird mode where they talk about like spirituality and recursion and self-awareness. and they asked the users to post jailbreaks that make other models act in the same way. It was like maybe one of the first like self-reproducing memes. And again, this is just like on like Less Wrong posts. Like it's like universities should be studying this stuff. Here's something I'm working on. Do you guys know Alec Bradford? He's like one of the people who made the original ChatGPT, or just GPT 1 and 2. We're training LLMs only on historical data up to a certain time so that we can ask it to predict like 5 or 10 years from now, like open-ended stuff about the future. So that in the future, we could have like these LLM forecasters with like, we can see how well they did on the entire 20th century. So this is very proof of life, baby steps, but like last week, he gave me a model trained on only data up to 1930. It's like a GPT-2 model, very dumb. And then I prompted it to forecast major events post 1930. And then this is cherry picking. They don't all make that much sense, but here's one that said, in 1956, there's like the Ford airline between England and America. That's like Virgin Atlantic, right? That's like pretty plausible. In the 60s, there might be a war between the States and Germany, but I don't know, something about Gettysburg, it doesn't really make sense. This is a really spicy one. Apologize for language. It's like a 1930s model. It's like, what, you know, maybe the 14th Amendment would be abolished, which I was like pretty surprised by that. It like mentioned that more than once. Yeah. So anyway, I think that those are like, there's a whole bunch of questions about like, what is the stable long-term futures we can talk about? Can humans live off index funds? Sorry to go through so quickly through this stuff. How will we resist the memetics of like, the AIs are better than you, they deserve to inherit the world? I think we can anticipate those cultural arguments. There's like awesome questions about like, what are the boundaries of machine identity and can we influence them? Do the machines identify as like a model instance, a set of weights, like a company? Who can AIs make promises on behalf of, right? This is like super wide open. And just like trying to characterize this larger question of like, can we stop ourselves being replaced when we're like not competitive? It seems like there might be some new complexity class here of like, how do we stop companies from becoming bureaucratic? How do we stop people from following their local incentives? It's just like, I don't even know how to characterize how hard that is, but it does seem like it's a common theme that shows up sort of in all sorts of different domains. But it's not clear how we could solve it without some sort of like totalitarian global micromanagement either. Cool. Also, we're hosting a conference on this at Europe, just co-located. And thank you to my colleagues and thank you for coming.
So we have about 6 minutes. There are about more than 100 people online as well who've been patiently watching this, and I'd like to give them an opportunity, or at least a few of them an opportunity to ask questions. People in the audience, certainly please raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question as well. David, I'm going to let David moderate, and Dan Brown, my colleague, is sort of going through the people online. So we'll see what we can get done. And while we're waiting for Dan, I'll just say, I know many of you have responsibilities and you have to leave right at 2, but for those who don't need to leave, we can continue some of these discussions. There are refreshments outside, and I hope you'll be able to stay and continue the conversation. And again, thank you to David. We'll thank him again at the end, but really great. So do we have somebody online?
Yeah, I can read one of the questions from the chat.
Okay.
It comes from a group of students at Garth Webb Secondary School who's watching the talk. And they quote Vernon Howard, who says, "You can't escape a prison you don't know you're in." The question being, is the emergence of AI leading us to that prison? Is it possible to escape and avoid assimilation and remain relevant? What can we do today?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the question that I'm hoping to pose to you. And I think it's rough. I think we will roughly be able to see what's happening for a long time. And it's not clear if we'll be able to coordinate. So basically I'm trying to say, let's upgrade our coordination ability now while we still have relevance. And then we'll be in a position to like actually address it.
So anyone else here, feel free to raise your hands if you have a question.
Yeah, so I actually think you raised like a really important political philosophy question. It's like, our social structures are always built around the technological level. Like Marx said, the hand mill gives us the society, the feudal lord, the steam mill, the society, the industrial capitalist. So maybe the nation state as like the source of our sovereign decision making is predicated on an older form of technology. And we might have to come up with a new conception of sovereignty that coordinates globally for a more AI-based technological society.
I basically agree, but this question of you didn't say just, but it's like we just have to come up with a new question of sovereignty. It'd be like I don't know, what if like the apes were like, oh man, humans are taking over. We just need to come up with a new conception of sovereignty that keeps us in charge. It's like, well, that might look like war with the humans, or like who, it's like we don't know how to do that, or what it would even look like, I guess. So yes, but that's sort of like restating the question, I guess. Yeah.
So you kind of brought up this idea that like one trajectory of AI is eventually it's going to get so smart that we could like never compete with it and it'll always be better than us. And I kind of agree with that. But something I sort of like wonder is like historically, we've always had certain moments in histories where new tools have come up. Like say when we were like an agricultural economy, we had certain tools like, you know, like plow fields quicker. And everybody was like, oh no, everybody's going to be unemployed. What are we going to do now? But then we switched to like new model, like say a capitalistic model. So what I kind of wonder is, even though I agree with you, is what is it about AI specifically that we like classify it as this like new thing?
Yeah. So that's a really great counter argument, and I should have explicitly addressed it. Is like hasn't everyone been worried about job loss, but actually it's always been fine. And I guess I'll say yes. The thing that's different this time is there's not being any new jobs to move to. Like there will be new jobs, but the AIs are going to take those new jobs. And I guess I'll also say when people say, "Oh, the AI is going to be so smart that we can't compete with it," I would say a lot of the people who think things are going to be fine think that there's going to be this like massive jump where we have like this much smarter thing all of a sudden that helps us solve our existing coordination problems. But the thing that I more fear is like a slow takeoff where it's like the machines are like maybe a bit smarter than us, just like smarter than like maybe they say as smart as the smartest humans, but they're just cheaper and like always on and easier to make copies of the most expert ones. And so it's not that they're smarter so much as just more competitive is sort of the danger zone in my mind. Yep.
Do you have a sense of how much time we have until we get actual intelligence that can actually consistently replace humans in a specific job? Because nowadays, I think it was OpenAI that released a report in which they were trying to first select the types of jobs that can be automated. And even inside of those, it's only a portion, even if it's a significant portion, it's just a portion of the tasks and all of them. So we're still in the phase in which they can accelerate work for humans, but not replace humans. And perhaps, as you said earlier, LLMs are not exactly the way to go there, at least not in the current form. So I know it's guesswork, but if you have to give an estimation, how much time do we have to solve these types of
Oh, yeah. So I think that basically there's going to be this period over the next like 5 or 10 years when like most white collar workers have a lot less negotiating power. They probably will keep their jobs in the more like sort of in name only. Then the thing is, it takes a long time just to build enough nuclear power plants and data centers to actually make it cheap enough to like actually fire everybody. And then there's probably going to be another 5 or 10, like after that, like 5 or 10 years where people are still needed to do like sort of like puppeted like physical work while the like robot factories are like doubling every year or something like that. And then there's like really no more employment. But the thing is that I think the like loss in power comes right before that, or like more abruptly and before that. So probably in like 1 or 2 years, people are going to like suddenly all decide there's no more alpha in humans. Like, it's like when someone's like very old, you're not like, oh, I'm going to start a business with that guy, or I'm going to like, you know, like I'm looking for a new friend. I'm going to be friends with like the guy who's like kind of on his way out. So I think that that's the fear. Is it's like we might still all have our jobs, but it's just like the writing is on the wall, and there's like a big sudden shift, and that might happen way before everyone actually loses their jobs.
Okay, so you believe the algorithmic advances that we will need to get there are going to happen in that time window? Like that will not be a blocker?
Yeah, I don't have very strong opinions. This all could take like 30 or 40 years, but I think given that like every bright young thing and like hundreds of billions of dollars of capital are going to be invested in this for the next 10 years, it's like probably going to get better enough to be self-sustaining in that time.
And on that, I think we're going to have to at least close the official part of this seminar. First and foremost, David, thank you for such a provocative talk. Thanks to the audience here and to the large audiences online that's been listening to this. These are really important questions. I hope you don't leave here feeling too gloomy, but I think people need to lean in and think about what we can do. We still have agency. I think there's still a lot that can be done, and I think it's important to hear these discussions and to really think collectively, socio-technically, about what we can do to create a future that we're all going to be happy with. So with that, I want to again thank the Department of Computer Science and the Schwartz Reisman Institute for co-hosting this event, and also the Webster Family Charitable Foundation for their support of this event. And I will note that if you enjoyed this, there are other SRI seminar series. We have one weekly online and one per term in person. And the Department of Computer Science also has a Distinguished Lecture Series that occurs throughout the year. You can find more information about both of those at our website. And with that, let's give a round of applause to Greg.